Celtics big man Rob Williams has been all over the headlines after being ruled out indefinitely with a meniscus tear. Time Lord left during the third quarter of that Timberwolves game on Sunday. And here's an update from earlier this afternoon on Rob via ESPN's Adrian Wojnarowski. Says after undergoing surgery for a torn meniscus in his left knee this morning, Rob Williams is expected to return within 4 to 6 weeks, a timetable that could land him in the lineup as soon as the second round of the Eastern Conference playoffs. Woj added after the procedure this morning, there's some optimism of a return on the shorter end of that 4 to 6 week timeline. The conference semifinals are set to start around April 30th to May 2nd. Let's bring in Chris Forsberg, who's live inside of TD Garden. And Forsberg, you hear that timeline, a 4 to 6 week return window for Rob Williams. However, how confident are you that Rob Williams can return in playoff mode after having surgery?
Amina, what a roller coaster this week has been for everyone on the Rob Williams fan club. First, you're thinking maybe he's lost for the season. Now there's some optimism. My whole thing has been I hope they're delicate with how they bring Rob back, right? So much of his game is predicated on explosion and jumping and leaping and athleticism. So anytime you have a knee and a tear, that I'm a little bit leery. All that being said, there have been guys that have gone through this process, and it's a very quick recovery in terms of you're back out there and getting ramped up soon. So they'll get a chance here to look at him, see where he's at, and we'll figure out if he can get out there. But the prospects of him being back out there for the second round of the playoffs is all of a sudden, Celtics fans were kind of coming back down from that like being drunk on positivity for the last few weeks. And now I think it's going to push back the other way, because if you get through the first round, you get Rob back, and if he's anything like he was during the regular season, all of a sudden you have a chance of making the NBA Finals. And so you can feel a little bit more of the buzz around here knowing that Rob might be back.
So I was talking to an NBA trainer on the way into the studio, and he gave me the brilliant insight of how the hell would I know, basically. Like, that's where we're at with Rob Williams and this knee. Right now, as we sit here, this is the best possible news. Rob Williams is not going to be sidelined multiple months with a repair of that meniscus. He is going to be back on the short end of that. And I thought it was very interesting, the language in the Celtics release that said is expected to be able to return to play within 4 to 6 weeks. Oftentimes, with these types of announcements, they say reevaluated in 4 to 6 weeks. Figure it out. They're saying he should be back to play within 4 to 6 weeks. But right now, let's just take the good news, because there are too many variables to account for over the next few weeks. How well does Rob attack that rehab? How quickly does his body heal? How quickly is he able to get back on the court and test that knee? I think the next benchmark for Rob Williams is going to be at the end of the season, during that week that the Celtics are off while the play-in stuff is going on and the Celtics are getting ready for game 1 of the first round. That's when we reevaluate Rob Williams and we figure out where he is in the course of his rehab and how close he is to returning. Right now, let's just all be like, this is great. He's not done. Yeah. He is not done. Let's be happy about this.
Absolutely.
And figure out potential bad stuff down the line.
Yeah, great news. And I'm sure, Chris Forsberg, you are excited about this.
Robert Williams did have surgery this morning to repair that torn meniscus in his left knee. The Celtics big man tweeting after having surgery today, quote, "Surgery went well. Appreciate all the prayers and concern." The Celtics have announced that he is expected to return in 4 to 6 weeks. Hello and welcome into our Bella Early Edition. We are live at the Garden. It's the first time we've been live at the Garden in over 2 years, Max. It's so good to be back.
Love it.
I am here with Cedric Maxwell, who also had a torn meniscus in his left knee. 4 to 6 weeks. Are you optimistic that he'll be able to return within that timetable?
A younger player right now, you think how he is, really healthy for the most part. And I think what you have is the science now is so much better than when I played. So I am optimistic about him coming back, but you never can tell because of that injury, and it really depends on the threshold, how much you were able to take with pain.
How were you able to handle the pain? Like, what helped? What might allow Robert Williams to return in maybe the second round of the playoffs if the Celtics make it that far?
I think one of the things that for me it was just going out playing, and it was we were in the playoffs and we were playing for the World Championship, so a certain amount of adrenaline kicked in. The next season it started to get worse and worse, and then I end up having surgery. surgery, and it took me longer to come back because they did not diagnose it early on. So with them doing it now, I think he has a better chance of coming back to the fold.
How do you feel about putting a timetable on his return of saying 4 to 6 weeks? Does that add pressure? Is that a smart way to go about it?
I absolutely hate it for a player because I think that, the pressure does come on, which you supposed to be back at a certain time. But it's going to depend on how you feel. Maybe you might come back earlier. It depends on, how the pain is. But for me, I think that when you put that kind of pressure and say 4 to 6 weeks or whatever it is, the media, more than anybody else, starts to talk about, well, you're supposed to be back. You're supposed to be back. And I think sometimes you rush yourself and you rush your body.
Yeah, and that's certainly not what you want Robert Williams to do, because you just mentioned it, that, it was a little misdiagnosed. It was diagnosed late for you. Obviously, things are different now, right? Technology is entirely different from when you played, but you certainly don't want this to be a long-term issue for him. When you did come back, what were your limitations? Like, I guess the first thing I think of is, how will a guy like Robert Williams, what will his conditioning be like? What will the trust be in that knee?
Well, I think for me, it was everything. It was about quickness, about moving out on the floor, his conditioning, getting back there. But here's a guy who, uses his tools. He's an extraordinary jumper. I wasn't. He was a leaper around the rim. So I didn't have to recover from that standpoint. His timing to get back on the court, get familiar with his teammates again, understanding now that, hey, this sense of urgency that this team looked from when being a non-competing team to people right now saying, look, this is the next world champion. So there is a lot of pressure on it.
There's also a lot of pressure on this team, because one of the big reasons that the Celtics are in the position they are in right now, surging and fighting Miami, the team they'll play tonight for that #1 seed, is because they've been so good defensively, and Robert Williams has been such a key to that. How do they move forward without him, and what will we be able to tell from tonight's game against Miami, a team that themselves is trying to prove something to this, to the Heat and to themselves as a team?
Well, I think that everybody has to step up, and this is Al Horford has to play a little bit more. Daniel Tice, you got him for insurance purposes. Now you got to cash in that policy. I think there's so many things that you look at with this team, and obviously when you play against a team like Miami, and Miami's been struggling here with some of the games they played. So psychologically, this might be a bigger game right now for Miami than it is for the Celtics. But what the Celtics have to do is get back out and play the same kind of defense. You have Marcus Smart at the initial point of attack, and everybody else fills in there defensively.
How much stock do you put in this game tonight? Like, I feel like if the Celtics go out and win, everyone's like, okay, well, they don't need, not that they don't need Robert Williams, but hey, they have it figured out. They've got the other pieces in place. And if they lose, everyone's going to look at this game and go, well, Robert Williams wasn't there. They're figuring it out. Is there more at stake tonight than maybe some people think there should be?
Well, when you have a guy and he's out for the short term, you can get by with him and you can win games. And you might even win a series. But to win a world championship, you're going to have a key piece like that who can come in, block shots, run the floor, tap the ball in, and what he does, he anchors that defense. Marcus is at the head of the snake, and what you had him at the end. So that's a huge component in what they do. Can they win a title, an NBA title, without Robert Williams, or with a Robert Williams that, let's say, when he comes back is 70%? 75%? You know what, and this is a great question, because this was asked of me before when Kevin Garnett went out. Oh, can they win? And I said, no, they couldn't. I learned some things about that. You hear from the front office, and I'll say it would be very difficult for them to win without Rob Williams because he's so good on the defensive end. And when you have a guy like that who's able to block the shots, run the floor, and the whole team rallies around him, you can get up on the guy and play a lot more defensively because Rob Williams is there and gamble that way. But without him being around, you don't gamble as much. Yeah, especially when you think that there's going to be three guys who are going to have to pull the weight of one guy in Robert Williams.